Hello again.
Hi!
Sorry I'm late. Jumped out of a window.
Get over it.
I can't always do this.
Get up. Off your ass.
It's just not fair. Why can't I just...
Pull to open.
Pull to open?
Yes, and what do you do?
You've known about me for a very long time. No more confessions. Sorry.
What? What don't they know?
No chance. No telling. Not me. Instead, I'm going to do something far worse. Here come the drums!
Hello and welcome to Pull to Open, the only podcast that covers the show Doctor Who in completely and totally random order. I'm Pete Paschal.
And I'm Chris Taylor. And yeah, we're totally random. We're totally random. We've been totally random for some time. We've been on this quest for, well, if I didn't know better, I'd say 7,000 years. Or is it 12,000 years? Or a million? Or a million and a half? We've been on this quest. Been on the quest for some time, but it sort of feels, we always feel fresh every time. We start anew.
Yeah.
We are born anew, you might say.
Kind of like hitting a reset button in a kind of a way. But no,
we just teleport in.
Yeah, you kind of sometimes need to flood in the memories of where you've been previously. And so previously on Pull to Open, okay, listeners, I'm going way back in the Pull to Open universe.
3 years ago.
3 years ago, we went to a little story called Hellbent.
And Pete, do you know which month we went to that in October?
Well, first, let me. What was it? Holy cow. Well, I guess 3 years ago. Yeah, it makes sense. And so the reason everyone knows that that Hellbent is this closer of Series 9, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a big deal. But, the reason we went there, obviously, we didn't come from the immediately previous episode. We came there from a completely random episode, which, of course, was The Day of the Doctor, one of the most epic stories in Doctor Who.
That's right. And we handed the randomizer over in that episode because we had our very first guest, Alisa Stern, creator of Dr. Puppet.
Right.
She took us to Hellbent, which was interesting because she was a fan of Heaven Sent, and she hit the randomizer button and it went to Hellbent. It was just one story away from her favorite. So that was a fascinating moment.
Yeah, so it was a close call, but it was interesting that we when you do things in random order, you're getting your context in random order. So you kind of need the show has evolved, the Pull to Open has evolved a lot in that time, but we may be completing a circle here in some ways.
Well, the interesting thing also that October, at the end of September that year, 2021 this was, we went to Face the Raven.
That's right.
So the randomizer loved Capaldi in the early days, and it loved this particular arc.
Yeah, and so there is a phrase that's repeated often around this time, which is called the long way around. And you might say that's kind of what we're doing. But before we get to that, folks, I want to also remind you of where we have been recently. Right. So about
in our punching a diamond wall repeatedly, we went to...
About 3 stories ago, we were in the Matt Smith era in a very controversial, I will say, episode, it turns out, as we'll talk about a little later in our poll. It was The Girl Who Waited, the one where Amy Pond gets essentially left for 30 plus years, something like that, while the Doctor and Rory sort of have to come and save her, and there's a lot of decision making, shall we say, in this episode that add to the controversy.
We were watching it as our older selves looking back on our younger selves, and suddenly the fate of older Amy and that looked quite different. So go back and check out that podcast. And then talking about fate and companions and death, the randomizer was in that sort of mood. So then it took us to Planet of Spiders, the Pertwee regeneration into Tom Baker story that turned out to be much longer and much more about weird spider-based versions of Buddhism than we expected it to be.
But then it was time for some more planets. Specifically,
another Pertwee planet.
That's right. Specifically one that was of the Daleks, but not Starro. Which came to a surprise to at least one of us.
That would be me, yes. Planet Asterisk of the Daleks, as I will now forevermore call it. But we had, the Randomizer does like to finish its arcs, because we had been to Frontier and Space, which is the Pertwee story that leads into Planet of the Daleks. And it decided to take us there just before we forgot, before our memories got erased, like a Shilda. And we were able to complete that arc while the story was still on our head. And then, Pete, where did it take us after Planet of the Daleks?
Well, again, it's taken things the long way around. We're here at Series 9, Episode 11, Heaven Sent.
Heaven Sent. Wow. Alisa Stern's favorite Doctor Who story. It would be so cool if she was here right now. I wish we'd thought to invite her to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
Wait a second.
Hold on.
Hello. Guess what?
Hey, something coming through the crackly televisions posted in every corner of the Pull to Open castle. It's Alisa Stern. How are you?
Oh my God.
Hey.
Surprise. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So how have the last 3 years been for you, Alisa?
Not much going on. No, I've been keeping busy doing different animation. Not so much Dr. Puppet related these days, but I guess since I was last on, I think I've cranked out 2 or 3.
Wow.
Something like that. I don't know. At least 2.
And the most recent one is called VHX. Yes.
VHX. Yeah, it's stop motion like Dr. Puppet, but instead of Doctor Who puppets, it's VHS tapes with little faces on it. And
yes.
That sounds awesome.
But it does feel a little doctorish, especially in the fact that there's a twist in the end.
There is. I think there's some cross appeal there. And it's, genre, horror, twisty, weird, retro. Are there any Doctor Who references in it? I don't know. There should be.
Well, there will be now.
Yeah, there will be now. Well, we don't know what's on. I mean, I haven't watched all those tapes. I did start watching them. The tapes that I actually used are just from eBay, and I didn't know it was on them. I have started to go through them. I did find some Star Trek, so who knows? There might be some Doctor Who that's in the film that we don't even know about.
I'm actually more interested in where you found a VHS player. But that's awesome. Can people find the films on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, actually, I can. If you go to YouTube and you search for Odd Frame Films, that is the YouTube channel that I put all of my non-Dr. Puppet animation and films on these days. VHS isn't on there yet. There's a trailer for it though, and if you want to see it, it's playing at horror festivals all over the world, but mostly just the US and UK.
Oh, nice. That's good.
Including
That's
a
smart.
horror festival in Wales.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of monsters, I see something in the background there that's stalking you. Be careful.
I don't know, Barnaby.
For our viewers on YouTube and Spotify, we have an unexpected cat.
Yeah.
Barnaby just showed up in the background there.
But anyway, there's a second cat behind me too, but he's just chilling.
They're going to keep approaching you until you say something you're really afraid of.
Speaking of, I think I also feel something else approaching rapidly.
Oh no. The day I'm
there
born.
it is. It's the Whomoji Challenge.
The day I'm born, so is the Whomoji Challenge born, and it starts moving towards me.
Well, it's all moving towards both of you, Alisa and Chris. Now you're both together in my torture chamber. That's right.
True. Yeah, but you know what? First rule of being in a torture chamber, we have the room. You're torturing us. You're trying to get information about us. We can use that. Sorry.
You got a point. I'm going to be interested to see how you use that. As I describe emojis, several of them this time, to both of you. And those emojis represent a Doctor Who story title. And you must guess the story title from them. And boy, oh boy, are there a lot of emojis this time.
And I just want to say, Alisa, as your compatriot in this torture chamber, first of all, welcome. Secondly, I've been doing this for more than 7,000 years, judging by the position of the stars, and I can say that I have had some absolute flailing embarrassment in here. So, however we cannot do worse than the Caves of Androzani. That's already priced in.
Oh, gosh.
I did not remember. I've seen the Caves of Androzani. I didn't remember there was bat milk in Androzani. Anyway, it became famous. It became a Twitter thing. But so just wanted to say, don't worry. I'll jump in front of the veil and be really embarrassing.
All right, I'm ready.
Are you ready? Okay. There's quite a few here. So because there's a lot of emojis, I'm going to blaze through a whole bunch.
Okay.
So I'm going to simply
wait. First of all, don't we say who the torturer is in this instance?
Oh yeah, this is again David Emmerich, who shared these on Twitter a bit ago, and they're robust Whomojis. I'll say that. And speaking of the long way around, this is definitely a long way around Whomoji. So there's a whole bunch, and I'll say like a lot of them. This is probably giving away too much, but I'm going to blaze through the ones towards the beginning, which might be obvious once you sort of figure it out. And then, well, I've said too much already. So I'm just going to like say a whole bunch. Okay, you ready? Because this is like 25 emojis, I believe.
What?
So here we go. All right, here we go.
All right.
So, planet Earth, a couple, man and woman couple, then a couple, two women, and then a couple, two men, dancing man, man in some kind of wheelchair, and then woman in a wheelchair, floating man in bowler hat, woman pregnant, female firefighter, male pilot, mechanic, artist, scientist woman, male student, and male police officer, female construction worker, female student or androgynous student, I'm not sure. Then British Guard. Okay, so that's the first part. Then there's an equal sign. Then there is a man, an office worker man in a tie. Then there is the word end with an arrow above it pointing to the man in the tie. And then there's a clock. All right. That was a lot. Throwing it all in the chat. Dreading me putting this together on YouTube later. But I'll figure it out.
Okay, so, I have a guess, but at least I on your face, I think I see some recognition here.
There were moments where it's just like one emoji kind of made me think. Now I have a guess, but I'm like now I'm also struggling to remember the name of the episode. Why can't I? Why do I think? What's it called? It's
describe the episode.
Matt
we can
Smith,
help you out.
See, the series 5 finale, Matt Smith's first season finale. What's that called?
Oh,
Big Bang.
The Big Bang. It's called The Big Bang, right? I thought that, and then I doubted myself. Why do I think it's The Big Bang? Because
it is. Okay, go ahead. Why do you think?
There's a lot of people in it, and they have different jobs, and there's a museum, right? Does that sound right?
There's a lot of people in the Big Bang. They have different jobs, and there is a museum. That's all true. That is not the Big Bang.
Oh, darn. Okay.
Is it? I think I got it, and I think weirdly, I think I had it when it was just. I was just like, okay, this is just a ridiculous number of people and occupations. Then the equal sign, and then it is very noticeable that the man is blonde after the equal sign, right? Is it the end of time?
It is the end of time. Boom.
They're all becoming the master.
It's almost one. It's another one of these ones you could have just had the last two emojis.
Yes. But then it wouldn't be torture.
It wouldn't be torture, and it wouldn't be the long way around. And
exactly.
Anyway, super fun. No worries. You were close there, Alisa. You had a season finale in there, even though this is technically a special. This is obviously the finale of the 10th Doctor era.
The Tenant finale. Yeah,
you were close. Awesome. Well, thank you, David Emmerich of Twitter. By the way, all of these Whomojis that we talk about on the show are fan submitted. You too can join the ranks of people who will forever be credited with Whomojis, because all of these go to our codex. All you need to do is please leave a review wherever you can leave a review, but the Apple Podcasts app is a great place to do it. And you can leave your Whomoji as the title, as the body, or wherever you like. That'd be awesome. Feel free to give us an answer key if it's not too obvious. And we will, throw it up there here in the show in a future episode.
I do sometimes invite people to do Whomojis that I've just thought of because I won't remember them. And I'm going to say that you could have also done the end of time with just 4 knocking emojis. I'm not even sure if there are. Is it knocking emoji?
The fist.
Yeah, the fist, and maybe the fist and the door, 4 times.
There you go.
But I will say, there are other Doctor Who stories with where 4 knocks are important. So
the old man emoji, the door, 4 knocks.
Yeah, right? That could totally work. Mm-hmm. That could totally work. So you don't have to do that for End of Time. There are other stories, and I'll just leave it to you to check that out. But that's the Whomoji Challenge, and something else we talk about every week, and something else you can do, dear listeners, poll from the bottom of the screen if you're on Spotify. That's right, it's poll to open, and you can rate the show that we're about to talk about, Heaven Sent. If you have any thoughts on how you feel about that, I'm not going to say which direction you might be leaning in. But that has our rating system, which last time Alisa was on, I think we just had 2 ratings. There are now a fantastic 7 ratings that we'll explain at the end of the show. But we have some ratings now for The Girl Who Waited, which, just to remind you, I rated this a Dalek. Pretty good Doctor Who, not one of the best, not a Viscount banger. Pete rated it a Dalek Khan.
That's right. Timey-wimey Dalek. I rated it the tiniest and whiniest of Daleks.
It turns out that so far, because these polls are still open, they remain open on Spotify for, I think, 7,000 years was the latest count. But go check that out. But as of now, the Dalek is in the lead. The people agree with us. 40% voted a Dalek, but 30% said Viscount banger.
That's
right.
That's
the best.
That's right. So very well regarded. I can see why. Yeah. It's very twisty, and it's a very good sort of dilemma. There's a lot of drama going on here that they mine out of it. It's pretty awesome. But notably, a good chunk of people, roughly 30%, also thought it was an Ogron, which is an irredeemably bad episode of Doctor Who.
Not even any of the redeemable things like the Hater, the Fixed Point of Time, Cassandra, the Zali. No, it was irredeemably bad. Ogrons. This is a divisive episode, and I don't know how many of those votes are people who agreed with me that it doesn't pass the Bechdel test, and is therefore slightly outdated.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a political component here at work, and I definitely can sort of see why some folks would not would maybe acknowledge that it's kind of a clever story, but that the way the characters resolve the dilemma and the way Amy is sort of treated in it in some ways is not perhaps as deep or as fleshed out as you might think, right? As you might want, rather. So
it is companion death at the end of the day. Yeah. It's an Adric moment, and it's not really treated like one. Or a Clara moment, given what we're about to talk about, but it's not really given that kind of. It's just the Doctor's I'm gonna peace out here, Rory. You have the task of talking to the future version of your wife through a door.
Alisa, what do you think of it? What's your verdict on The Girl Who Waited?
I agree. It's kind of good, but it's not amongst the best. I haven't seen it in a while, so I'm trying to remember. Probably haven't seen it in.
Yeah, it's the one with the hand bots is the other thing.
Yeah, she goes and then she ages, and I do remember it not being. I mean, it doesn't feel as sensitive as it could have been. I also remember really not liking the old wig. They didn't even do a very good job making her look older because she still had this great hair, and I'm like, how?
The wig should have been worse. In other words, it was her hair was too nice. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, no, I feel like they kind of had it both ways because they're like,
salon.
She's an awful old monster, but her hair's great. I'm like, oh, okay. No, it's pretty good. But I mean, Moffat loves to have stories where there's time jumps and waiting. He loves to make his characters wait. And I mean,
oh boy, does he ever.
I feel like every time, he's approaching a season, he's like, okay, how can I top the last time I made a character wait? And then he had this really great idea one time. But I do like the parallels between Rory waiting but that had already happened, because that is the Big Bang we were just talking about. But right, because then that comes up, and it's like, I don't know, it's not fair to compare them all.
Yeah,
but
and this is definitely like, if you think about it, you're totally right. He ends up going further and further and further in terms of the amount of time waited. If you look from his run at the very beginning with Matt Smith, and Amy waits like whatever it is, 14 years, and the thing we're talking about, Girl Who Waited, and that's longer. And now we're about to do Heaven Sent, which is probably his the pinnacle, I guess. How do you top that unless he went to another universe?
He can't ever do that plot again. I think that's one of the great things about it.
You could have like the universe, entropy of the universe could end and then get reborn. I guess that would be the next way to do it. You just have to catch the whole universe on the next go round.
Serious waiting, but honestly, I don't want to make our listeners experience too much waiting now that we are at the point in the show where we are going to summarize the story we're about to talk about. But before that, I wanted to just let everybody know again, you can support the show by here on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you can like and subscribe. That's an easy way to do it. But you can also join our membership, and you can become a true companion of the podcast. And there's another level. You can go to higher level and be a Viscount and join us with a commentary, just like Alisa's doing right now. Very easy to do. And if you want to just do a one-time donation, a super thanks is something you can do on any video. Just go check that out. Also, you can go to patreon.com/pull2open, or you can also support directly through Spotify. That's possible too. And speaking of folks who might need your support, a gentleman by the name of Chris Taylor, I believe, is about to jump in to a confession dial, and over and over and over and over again, he's going to summarize the plot of Heaven Sent, and he might only remember the last time he does it, folks. So we'll do some editing. We'll do some creative editing. You don't have to do it over and over again, but I assure you he's going to get this right. Right, Chris?
You just brush the burn marks off my temples here and kick aside the skulls at my feet. I think I'm ready to get down to this, but I will say, I'm afraid. Okay, did that hold it off? No. I will say this episode is 55 minutes. It is longer than the average. So I'm going to make a special plea for. We usually give 1 minute for regular New Who episodes.
Well, I'll parry your request by saying this is also simpler than the average in terms of the story. So I think that sort of counters the forces counter out. So no, I think you get 1 minute because we allow 1 minute for every episode of New Who. So
torture.
If I didn't get the extra time for Girl Who Waited, you're not getting it this time.
Oh God. Okay, but
all right.
And then we're going to do it like in shorter and shorter increments, and then I summarize in 5 seconds, and then 1 second, and then I break through it.
Well, I think the more you pound on that wall, the more you're going to add time, though. Right? That's just how it's going to work. So keep pounding away here at the official Open
torture chamber. I'm pulling in your details while I remember. Okay. All right, I'm ready for this.
It is time for the official Pull to Open summary of Heaven Sent in 3, 2, 1, go.
Clara's dead. The doctor's grieving her. He's been transported to this castle, and he doesn't know what's going on, and there's a veil following, and the TV screens everywhere, and there's a spade, and eventually he starts digging, and he escapes the veil once by jumping out of a window, plunging into the water. He finds a lot of skulls in there, and he comes out, and they're already clothes that are dry already, and he switches them out, and there's all sorts of stuff that happens in this weird castle. He can't really figure it out, except that the veil stops when he says something he's afraid of, so he says a few of those things. Eventually, he finds that there's a marking to dig it. He finds a clue to room 12. I am in room 12, it says. So he keeps trying to get to room 12. He has to move the castle around a lot. Eventually he gets up to the sky, sees the stars. The stars look like 7,000 years out of position. Anyway, he figures out, he finds in room 12 a diamond door that he has to keep punching through. And he keeps punching it through it for the next 2 billion years. And then he gets the Gallifrey, and he's back in Gallifrey. He says the hybrid is me.
Nice, you got it. That's pretty good. You were begging for those extra seconds, all those 7,000 cycles ago, and you didn't even need them. It only took you about a few billion times to get it right.
It does. So I will say, Stephen Moffat's intentions, for heaven's sake. Let's start looking at the confession dial level of this thing. Pull way out. That is supposed to be what happens in the story, that the Doctor is getting progressively faster and faster with every cycle. So I can fully believe I would be faster if I did another cycle on that.
I don't know if he's getting faster, but it's kind of like he gets a little more time at the end the more he wears out the wall, right? So he gets a few more seconds every...
One more punch.
Every few thousand years.
But he's also figuring it out faster. And one thing we should say here, one thing I don't think you automatically think of with Heaven Sent. You sort of realize, maybe intellectually at some point you realize the Doctor's been there for 7,000 years. But what Moffat did with this, and part of the genius of it, is he actually wrote versions of it that even he can't remember of what happened in those first 7,000 years. For example, one of the things he did, paint a portrait of Clara.
Mm-hmm.
And he, on the first go round, he hadn't figured out room 12. And Moffat is in his thinking, he was thousands of years old the first time. And then finally, almost accidentally, he finds room 12.
Right.
So
yeah.
It takes him a while.
There's a lot of sort of headcanon, and I think Moffat has subsequently guided the headcanon to what his version of it is.
And the room resets. I don't know. I think I like whatever Moffat says is happening. I like the simple version that it was always a loop. It's a closed energy loop, which means that all that stuff would have already have been there. I don't know.
Maybe.
There's the chalk marking on where the Doctor's supposed to dig, right? And that is the thinking is that was the Doctor himself doing the chalk. He figured out ways in which this castle doesn't reset.
Well, let's get to the rules and all of that in a minute, but let's zoom out a little bit. And I'd love for all of us to kind of go back in time a bit and try to remember the first time we saw this. Do you guys remember what you thought, how you felt, and what your initial reaction was on first broadcast? Alisa, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. And I was, sort of close to seeing it with at a convention, which so that's series 8. Oh my god, I'm getting to the point where it's series 8, right? No, 9.
This series 9.
It's 9.
9, yeah.
Man, I am due for a rewatch of everything. Series 9 aired in 2015. It was very peak Dr. Puppet. I was doing a lot of conventions and stuff, and Series 9 was really great series of highs and lows, I would say. So I was at Long Island Who, which is a great little Doctor Who convention here in New York.
We were just there.
Really?
We were just there.
I haven't been in years, but I should go sometime. Yeah.
It was super fun. Go check out our podcast of interviews. We have, I'm talking now to the listeners, but you too, Alisa.
I should.
We interviewed Terry Molloy. We interviewed Mark Strickson, a bunch of folks who've appeared in the show and worked on the show. They revealed some stuff to us. But anyway, go ahead. You were in Long Island Who. Yeah,
which is a great convention. The people who run it are lovely. So recommend. I will return one day. So I was at LI Who in 2015, and luckily Doctor Who was airing at the time. So I got invited with the group of Dr. Puppet folks. There were 4 of us at the convention together, and we got invited to a room watch party to watch Doctor Who, where we all together watched what's it called? Oh, see, look, I'm terrible with names right now. We watched
Face the Raven?
Sleep No More.
Sleep No More.
Sleep No More, yeah. 2 before,
Sleep
which
No
we've
More.
also been to.
Yeah, which is
the first one.
That one is a real divisive episode, I would say. But it's I mean, I remember when Series 9 was announced, and they kind of maybe it was in an article in Doctor Who magazine or something, and Moffat said that we do some experimental episodes this season. We have a found footage episode, and then a one-hander where it's just Peter Capaldi. And I remember thinking, a found footage episode, I can't wait. I bet that one will be really good. Turns out I was a little wrong about which one I would like more, but I did get to watch Sleep No More with a bunch of enthusiastic fans, and we did not enjoy that episode generally. And then
You're enthusiastic in your disdain.
Yeah, we were all kind of like, ooh, okay. But then
It's because you love it. It's because you love the show. That's why.
That
you
episode,
criticize out of love.
That episode is 2 before Heaven Sent, right? Because it goes from Sleep No More into Face the Raven.
Right.
Yeah. So there was a 2-week gap there. And then I think Chicago TARDIS was 2 weeks later, and they got to simul watch Heaven Sent. And I was like, I picked the wrong convention.
Chicago TARDIS.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, man, but it's fine. I watched it by myself, alone in my apartment. But my good pal Scott, who also was heavily involved with Dr. Puppet and had been at LI Who. He was back in England at the time, and I remember finishing it, and I just sent him like a message that just said, wow, and then he responded. He was like, wow, and we were both just like, we just nerded out, and so we both were just like, that was incredible. And I remember like getting a tear in my eye. Like the episode absolutely, from the first time I watched it, just hit me emotionally. Peter Capaldi's performance, I was like, this is the best Doctor. Absolutely cemented my adoration for Peter Capaldi and the whole 12th Doctor episode. And I still think it's my favorite era. And I just adore that episode. And, immediately made the red velvet outfit for the Dr. Puppet. So he has that outfit. I did do like some little photo shoots in I was going to say graveyard. It wasn't a graveyard, though, but I just found some things that looked like a graveyard in Prospect Park. And although there is a graveyard there, I just shot in the most fitting place, I think, in the Vale of Kashmir, which is just this really creepy part of Prospect Park. It's called the Vale, weirdly.
Wow.
It's like it's an overgrown garden, and I shot the puppet in there, so I have some photos of that somewhere. And
Prospect Park, of course, being one of the big parks in Brooklyn here in New York. But most people know Central Park, Prospect Park, designed by the same person, and it's better. I'll say
it is.
In a garden, so the Dr. Puppet can look around and be like, "Oh, who would garden? It's dictatorship for inadequates."
Exactly. So yeah, and
I think your reaction.
My favorite episode.
Yeah.
From the moment I saw it. It's always been my favorite since the moment I saw it.
Oh my God! So it's your favorite episode of Doctor Who?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, that's you are not alone. I will say you're Professor Yana here in your regard for this episode, and I'm speaking, of course, of the Doctor Who magazine polling that was most recent in the last. I think it was about a year ago or so at this point.
Yeah, they did it for the 60th.
Yeah, so they polled all the Doctors and what's their best episode, and then they did a complete poll of the entire run, and Heaven Sent edged out everything else. Importantly, it even edged out technically the favorite of the 12th Doctor era. So this is a bit weird because when they polled just the 12th Doctor era, World Enough End Time and the Doctor Falls, that story actually ended up being top. But when they polled everything against each other, I don't quite know how this works because it's slightly contradictory, but I gotta get it. It's like Heaven Sent edges out everything. So it's a strange phenomenon. It's a little like quantum mechanics almost. It doesn't really
seems entirely appropriate.
Somehow it feels right.
If you pair like World Enough in Time and the Doctor Falls like as a unit, I think it's a stronger finale. Heaven Sent is a stronger episode, regardless of how it fits into the narrative structure. So maybe it's interesting. We'll get to what is the best. I think we also have to place Heaven Sent against Day of the Doctor. We have to talk about that a little. But just Pete, to go back to your question about can we reset time in our brains? Can we go back to 2015 and remember what it felt like to watch this first? I can, because I actually wrote the review of this one for Matchball. And I had the screener, so not to be a Heaven Sent hipster, but I did see it before all y'all. And here's how I started my review, which I gave it an A+. I said there's an old storytelling rule that the best way to make your audience sympathize with your characters is to make the saddest thing possible happen to them. By that yardstick, the Doctor just became the most sympathetic character on television. And I think that is, it's weirdly, because it does show up in the middle of a trilogy, it is still actually a great one to show to people who've never seen Doctor Who before, right? Because it's just like a German expressionist movie.
It just, the feel and the look of it, we really shouldn't go far without shouting out Rachel Taylor, the director, who also did Dark Water, Death in Heaven, also did Hellbent. Like, she really nailed this one in terms of how it looks. I will say, if you're ever looking to calibrate a new television, this is an episode to watch, because like, you've got to get the contrast just right. They don't usually do the hard edge lighting. And by the way, Capaldi's the perfect doctor to do a hard edge lighting on, sure. Right? He's got that perfect silhouette.
All the features. Yeah.
So it looks amazing then. It bears rewatching. But yeah, I think all of us kind of watching at the time instantly recognized that this was a classic, even if we had questions.
Yeah, it was really impressive to watch it. You're just kind of blown away by the big reveal at the end. But more than that, Capaldi, you're right with Capaldi for the entire run of it. And you're also sort of surprised about sort of the vulnerability he shows and what is sort of seemingly new information about the Doctor as well. So I think it has a lot to offer, to your point, Chris. Even if you haven't seen any Doctor Who before, it's a really interesting structured episode. It's a really interesting character study. But even if you know the show backwards and forwards, you're still riveted, and you've never seen anything quite like this. And you're kind of getting even more, not just sort of facts, because you hear about like why he left Gallifrey, which is we'll get into, but also just like it really epitomizes some of his character traits, like all of the stuff where he bursts into the TARDIS, for example, and this is sort of the place he goes to get out of scrapes and sort of think things through in moments, even though they play it out like it's happening as a scene, right? Which is kind of such a genius device to kind of unpack the Doctor and his audaciousness, is how I characterize it. We've talked a little bit about his recklessness in recent episodes, which of course The Girl Who Waited underscores, but I think here they kind of have a different angle on it. And it's an angle you really like, because you can kind of get behind him and what he's doing. But you also sort of understand that it led to where he is now, right? And we can probably talk about that, because even though this sort of gets at the Doctor in his essence, he is playing it a little differently, in the sense that this is a Doctor who's grieving. He's just lost Clara. He comes in angry, and his first line is about he's going to make whoever got him here pay, essentially. Which is a little, not quite what we used to from the Doctor, right?
But he's also being doctorish in the sense of like he can still be funny. He also, like, mere minutes after what you're saying, Pete, he utters what I think is maybe one of the funniest all-time lines in Doctor Who, which is "ran out of corridor." There's a life summed up.
I also really
which
love
is
the
just
moment. Oh, go on. No, it's a great.
I was going to say that's wonderful, but yeah, he's got some great comic lines in it, and one of the great ways that this is it is a story about grief. I mean, that is very obvious, but it also gets at the fact that like grief can be fun. Like, you are in such a dark place that humor is one of the few ways you can get out of it. Right? I mean, I'm watching this for the first time since my dad passed a couple of years ago. It's still obviously like, I mean, the line about it's not the day that you die, that the person dies. It's all the days where they stay dead, like they flagrantly refuse to come back alive. And that's kind of a line that's both funny and tender. And so much of this gets at the nature of grief and the nature of, I think, of life as well. Like, we all have to keep pounding away on our diamond walls every day, partly forgetting what we did the day before. And so I think it's marvelous from that sense. But yet, the humor, this would be unbearable without humor. So if we'd lost the funny Doctor, and if we'd lost the clever Doctor, like the Mind Palace Doctor, which is really what he is when he gets into the TARDIS and he's talking to Clara at the blackboard, that whole thing of like, I'm nothing without an audience, and then you notice one second he looks at the camera.
Not even a second. It's probably like half a second. But there was actual script notes in there about like he takes the briefest of glances at the camera.
But no, Peter, he pulls like a whole face. It's great. I think one of the other like funny moments that feels that I probably didn't actually realize what this line was until a few watches in is when he is digging the hole, like a metaphorical grave or whatever it is. And he, with the clue about room 12, and then the veil starts, getting at the door. And then he puts the shovel under the door and he says, rules of a triangle, physics of a triangle, you lose.
Yeah.
Like, but the sound design is kind of so on top of that line that it gets a little buried, haha. But yeah, physics of a triangle, you lose. And like, what?
I really hope that there's some geometry teacher somewhere who's adopted that and says that to his class.
But that's the thing. It's like, this is, even now, even in sort of its epic storytelling, even with this sort of arc it's doing in this character study, they find time for the original mandate of Doctor Who as education. Because he's totally right? Like, it's like, oh yeah, learn a little something there. Triangle physics, why you have all truss is a thing that everyone who's a civil engineer knows and goes back to when you're building bridges. Triangles rule. They're very sturdy.
Yeah. And
that
Rose scale of hardness too, right?
It does. So I want to talk about, ways in which this might not work after you think about it. But once you're in it, once you're in the clockwork mechanism of this story, it does all kind of seem to make sense. The physics all make sense. And it is one of the loveliest things I think the Doctor has ever done, of him throwing the stool to jump out the window. First of all, because there's so many great lines about that, of like, take charge of your torture room, die faster. They won't be expecting that. And I just love that whole bit. But the fact that it does reward you with, like, you get the flashback of like, oh, he heard the sploosh of the stool. Oh, that's why he was dropping the petals. Oh, that's why he dropped the eyeglass. He was testing the gravity. All of this comes together and it feels earned. And everything in this episode feels earned like 1,000 times over. There are many ways in which Moffat could have taken the Doctor back to Gallifrey that wouldn't feel earned, but punching through a wall for 2.5 billion years, that's sort of the definition of feeling earned, right? So what do you guys think about that? Like, we'll get to our quibbles, but like, whatever the quibbles, the mechanism in this is so delicate and it's so right that while you're in it, while you're watching it, those quibbles just don't come up, right? There's nothing that stops you. Or, I mean, is there anything that stops you?
Well, to rewind to my first time watching it, I wouldn't say anything stopped me, but I did stumble a bit on some of the nitpicks. Now, Moffat has addressed some of those, but I've got a little list we can go over a little later. But again, I think to your point, it's not like they come anywhere near to like ruining the episode, right? It's just like there are things you just sort of wonder, and I think wondering about them is almost testament to how good this is, because you want it to work. You want the clockwork mechanism to be working perfectly. But I think you've nailed it on that scene, which is definitely. I mean, there's so many great scenes in this one; it's hard to pick. You could easily list off 5 or 6 as being like some of the best ever in Doctor Who. But that thing where he throws the thing out of the window, and then they sort of go over it again with he's putting things together with his mind. I like that, because that's the scene that speaks directly to what I said earlier about the Doctor being audacious as opposed to reckless. Now, you can make a case for either one, but in other words, he didn't just jump out and sort of assume everything's going to be all right. He started thinking long before the action. And I would draw a parallel from this scene to a more recent scene in Ncuti Gatwa's era, where it was actually in the Church on Ruby Road, where the policeman kind of stops him, and the Doctor, in sort of a Sherlock Holmesian kind of way, figures out what's the deal with this guy and what's going on. But it's not because he has it doesn't have magic knowledge because he's a Time Lord, or that he went forward in time. He's just figured it out. He's just really, really clever, and he's got thousands of years of experience. And that's what I sort of see here, right? It's like there's no magic, there's no reliance on some external force. He's actually smart enough, experienced enough, clever enough, using his mind. He's outsmarting the enemy as he's walking through this adventure, and he's spelling out how he does it and his whole approach to this. Of course, that approach is also what led to Clara's death, right? Which is, again, ties into the whole theme of this episode. But it's just such a well-executed, well-edited, well-directed moment. I don't think it might be my favorite part in the whole thing. I don't know. There's so many others we still have to get to.
Well, it is a point at which you realize, and you nailed it. I think you were talking about the fact that he had actually started figuring this out. In contrast to what he says, which is, assume that you're going to survive and then work backwards. Like I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say next. Like all of this, that's just play acting. He's smarter than he lets on. And that's a huge part of Doctor Who, because it is to his advantage to appear more dumb and more sort of eccentric and bumbling and doctory than he really is. Right? And that's a big part of the Doctor character. And here he's kind of giving the game away. Almost as if we were the Veil and he has to reveal something true about himself. Because, yeah, you're right. If you watch that scene closer. And it's funny. It's funny that this is the first time I'm thinking about this, because there is so much in Heaven Sent. Like, I've watched this a number of times. I watched it again this morning. I was today years old when, which is, by the way, should be a line in Heaven Sent. I was today years old when I saw that the thing that Capaldi says at the start, the lines about as soon as you're born, there's a shadow with you and one day you'll notice it approaching you. Great, great intro. But you see that it's written on the walls of the castle in the background. And I had to watch it this many times to actually see that. And actually had to read the script first to see that it was in the script and then go, where the hell was it in the show? And then see it. So there's so much buried here that we have to, every time we watch this, we have to get our spades out.
It's very deep.
Hey.
What scenes do you think spoke to you the most? What really resonated when either on the first watch or your most recent watch in prepping for the pod?
I do love everything you're saying with the window and the skulls and just the skulls themselves. And
the skulls, I will say,
it's dare I say iconic. The reveal of that and kind of how it's done. And I don't think that it's done. It's like, it's not, it's not too heavy handed of like, this is all Peter Capaldi. I feel like it's done pretty tastefully, but when we have the reveal, and it's also, there is, if I'm remembering correctly, right, there's like a crossfade where he's holding the skull and then we just like fade to him. So we're basically told very early on who the identity of the skull is.
I never noticed that actually. Yeah, but you're right.
Yeah, there is. And yet it's, the actual reveal is done really well, but I mean, just, it's all of those little details, but I also really love all the stuff in the TARDIS, the memory palace TARDIS, as you said. And that stuff is some of the way it's shot. Yes, Rachel Talalay did such an incredible job shooting in the TARDIS. And those scenes especially, it's like, there's really creative shots. It's a lot of like Peter behind the, all the glass elements in the TARDIS console and just being warped and weird. And the like dream Clara, and, he's talking to her. And it's just...
And the way he's on the floor of the TARDIS when he's trying to say, "Can't I just sleep?" He's dying at the end, and then at the end of his cycle, and he's on the floor of the TARDIS at that point. So you see that, like, it's almost worse than seeing the blood and seeing his scars. Is seeing him on the floor of the TARDIS, right? Because that means like you could almost have the cloister bell in that scene. And also just the moment of the realization when it hits him, and we could talk about what that really means, like what he's realizing, how much he's realizing. And I have always been like, just watching it, like having not read the script and not knowing what Moffat has to say, that moment of realization of the Doctor realizing what is actually happening to him is not only realizing that he's in a loop, but him remembering all of the previous loops. That is how that's how it's acted. So that's how I choose to.
Well, and the dialogue suggests that too. I do think I don't think it quite works in the entirety of Doctor Who, or like he does say, "I can remember it all." But I do question whether he literally has 4.5 billion years of memories in him when he walks out. I think there's he sort of taps into the consciousness of himself
it's the
of dying again. You know what I mean? Like, he has realization, but you would think like if he literally suddenly had all those memories, he'd just go like, what? Like almost like, what's going on?
It's a lot of
go
the
nuts.
same memory.
Yeah.
So
I think the weight of it hits him, and the weight of the millions and billions of years hits him all at once, and that's another really powerful shot. And just the cinematography is just another level for this. I mean, really everything about this episode, and I know that they realized that very early on with the script. I was lucky enough to be at galley in 2018.
AKA Gallifrey 1.
Yeah, Gallifrey 1.
Yes.
I think it was 2018 when Moffat and Rachel Talalay and also Murray Gold were all there, and they did like a they just talked about Heaven Sent. Basically, there was I went to a live commentary with Rachel Talalay, and also there was a Murray Gold thing, and it was just everyone talking about Heaven Sent, and that script was.
Wow.
They realized Stephen knew the script was really special. So it was given special treatment at every level, which is why it's so good and it looks so good and it sounds so good, because it was getting a little extra attention. And
nice. Well, we're heaping on praise on the episode. I think this might be a good time to pivot a little bit
Yes.
and get into the list I sort of alluded to earlier, which is things that are potentially plot holes. I'm saying potentially because, like I say, Stephen Moffat has actually come in and explained some of them. He hasn't explained all of them, to my knowledge. So he gave an interview in Doctor Who Magazine 495. I don't actually have it, but it was nicely summarized in a later Doctor Who Magazine on sort of the Wiki.
Yes. I have it right here.
Oh, you have it because you have all the digital copies. So you've probably done it.
Digital.
So just to summarize, so I've got a number of things that sort of make you go, wait a minute. And I will admit these, I stumbled over some of them on first watch because I kind of thought, but that wouldn't work because X. So let's go with one of the first ones, which is relatively easy to explain, which is the clothes. So he comes into a room where the clothes from his previous self are there because he put them out to dry and he puts them on and leaves his wet clothes, which of course leads everyone, I think, to question, well, what happened the first time? And it's a kind of a hole, but in Moffat, the episode never explains it, but Moffat has come in and said, well, there's actually some kind of clothes room or some clothes that are off screen.
Yes, the castle provides clothes just as it provides food.
Yeah. So
which is fair. I buy that.
He found some clothes at least the first time, maybe more times. And then once there was a cycle where he didn't find the clothes, he just put on his previous version's clothes. Honestly, I don't think you even need to do it more than once, right? I think literally the first time he puts them out to dry. So why wouldn't you just put those on? You know what I mean? Because they're your clothes. So as soon as there is a version of his clothes sitting there, all subsequent doctors just put on his clothes.
Also, if this is a bespoke torture chamber, then why couldn't it also have his clothes already? I feel like it's not. I don't know.
If it's a bespoke torture chamber, there is definitely a version where he goes and he finds Colin Baker's coat hanging to dry. And he's like, oh, I guess I got to put this on now. Oh, geez, I got to face the veil and wear this thing.
So this is fair enough, but there is another problem this creates, and I'm going to jump to it. But it's a problem that it hasn't really been fully resolved, even though there's a lot of stuff written around this episode, including a short story. And that's honestly the reset. So the rooms and everything are apparently reset for every cycle. But the rules on the resetting are very unclear, because if the room is reset, why would the clothes not disappear? Similarly,
always there.
There's the painting where apparently he painted that at some point. That's sort of the implication.
Yes.
But why is the painting still there? Why wouldn't that just be blank every time? Same with the I am in 12 message, which apparently he wrote to himself, right? Well, again, why isn't all this stuff reset? Well, do you know the answer to this?
Yeah, well, he first of all, Moffat has said that the room with the painting on the wall, that wall is part of the outer wall of the castle that doesn't reset.
That's a bit of a stretch, because I think the outer wall of the castle is the diamond, right? I get why the diamond's not reset.
No, the diamond is not the outer wall. The diamond is the edge of the confession dial.
Right, that's what I mean. But I get why that wouldn't be reset.
The skulls don't reset because that's outside.
That's another thing. Maybe I should have jumped to the reset at the end, because the skulls is another one. That's honestly one of the other things, as I thought about it, that bothered me, because he dives in. There's a bunch of skulls that are roughly 20 feet down, maybe, and there's obviously thousands of them because he's been there 7,000 years. But if those don't reset, what happens after 1 billion years or 4 billion years? There'd be so many skulls, it would fill up the entire place over and over and over again.
How long can a bone last? I mean, I think it's
that's fair. That's actually a really good point.
It would decompose. Yeah.
Eventually, yeah. That's a good point.
I've got
Maybe
to
that's
say that
all you need.
a brief break for actually how they did this, and it's one how they did this detail that actually enhances watching this episode for me, which is rare. Sometimes, as the Doctor mentions in this, like, I'm showing you how the magic is done, but it still works, right? That skull is Peter Capaldi's skull. It's actually him, and they had it for Under the Lake Before the Flood, where they had the ghost version of the Doctor, so they had to do a mask of his face. So that's what this is from, and that just gives me chills, right? It's not just the Doctor looking at his own skull. It's Capaldi looking at his own skull, having his own Hamlet moment.
Wow.
I hope
What
he
an
gets
amazing
a one. He can just have that at his house on his mantle.
Yeah. Every so often he just sort of picks it up.
So I mentioned the painting already. So, I guess you presume he paints a new one every 10,000 years or so, maybe.
I also feel like the painting could have, again, if it's a bespoke torture chamber, having the painting there would just be part of the torture. I mean, I feel like...
You know what Moffat has said about that painting that makes that just, again, it's just another twist that it turns your heart another 90 degrees, is that he said that I am in 12 is also written on the back of the painting.
Right, though they never show that, I think.
They never show that, and the Doctor never sees it again because he just can't not stand to not look at Clara's face.
So I'm going to get one more little nitpick here that I don't think is ever really fully explained, but I think I can headcanon it. And then I'm going to talk about one more thing on the reset. So the other thing is the stars. So he mentions 7,000 years. He can tell because the stars have shifted, and he knows where he is, right? He says he's 1 light year from where he was, which was presumably Earth. Again, that's another very minor thing. Well, where is he then? Exactly. Like a 1 light year, like in the Earth cloud or something, but never mind. Assuming that there's maybe a Time Lord space station out at that point, and it's just kind of waiting for him to, just there for the Doctor. Yes, 7,000 years, stars would shift. It would be noticeable. It'd be significant. The thing is, after 1 million years, 10 million years, 1 billion years, the stars would shift so much that it really honestly wouldn't look like anything. Like you would have no clue what you're even looking at. Now, the only way I can headcanon this is that because the Doctor's a Time Lord and a time traveler, he at least has some sense of star charts at various times.
Yeah, I can buy that.
In the future. That's the only thing I can sort of think of there.
We talked about this when we did Hellbent, that the Doctor has been to the end of time many times. So, yeah, I can buy that he would, he's the kind of nerd who would just look over star chart magazines, under the covers at night. It's like, because you could predict years in advance what the stars would look like. So I can buy that. I think you're right.
Yeah,
that's okay. Can I throw in a thing that I've actually just only thought about on this rewatch for the show, but it's a thing that the one thing that's talking to me that Moffat has not addressed. He's inside the confession dial, right? So basically, this episode is Flatline, but tinier, right? It's the Doctor is super tiny, right? And which kind of makes
bigger on the inside.
It's bigger on the inside. Yeah, I know. Time law of physics. So maybe it really is. But I would this is why I would love to see a version of this with a helium voice. Like Capaldi doing a helium voice. You just get the idea that there's this super tiny Doctor running around inside the confession dial, leaving tiny skulls. And if you are too scared by Heaven Sent, if you are too darked out by this lake full of skulls, I just want you to imagine that the Doctor's just yay big for the whole time.
It's just like a miniscope. That's all it is.
So, yeah.
Well, one last word on the reset, because this is actually addressed in some extra media, some external media. So there was a short story. I haven't read it, but I think it was in Doctor Who magazine, and it was basically about the Veil. And it basically tells the story from the Veil's perspective. So again, this is all, extra. This is not necessarily canon. But the story is that the Veil isn't just the embodiment of his nightmare. It's actually a being. And it's a being that actually sort of can remember each time. And after a while, the Veil essentially starts to root for the Doctor and tries to help him in some way. And that's why he leaves the spade and tries to get him to use the spade to smash because you wonder, why doesn't he just use the spade on the diamond? Well, he can't get past the Veil. And it really wouldn't help that much anyway. But all of that is sort of shown in this story. But one of the other things that is this story reveals, again, take it for what you will. If you don't want it to be this way, it's not really canon. But the confession dial doesn't actually reset. It's the veil that is actually fixing everything and literally, repairing the window. And I guess, he has this little Home Depot YouTube there ready to do it. But I mean, you can just sort of picture that. He's got kind of a toolbox and he's got to literally fixing all this stuff and scrubbing out the blood from the stones or whatever.
I love the idea that the doctor might accidentally find that on one of his go-rounds. He finds a shed with got 10,000 windows.
The story kind of reaching a little too hard to explain away the discrepancies. You know what I mean? Because there are discrepancies. I would honestly prefer to headcanon it that the reset isn't absolute and there are certain rules to it, which is to say if the doctor deliberately sort of changes things in a room, that, it's smart enough. It's like a game. It can remember in certain situations and it'll clean up, incidental stuff like bloodstains, but it doesn't clean up deliberate actions. So that's kind of what I'm going with. That said, the window is a little difficult to reconcile there, but I think there's a little complexity to how the resetting works.
Well, I mean, maybe it's leaving things like this could explain the painting. It's leaving things that just benefit the confession dial, which is the torture chamber. So having the painting hurts him, but having the window remain intact so that he will jump through it and find the skulls. So I guess it's kind of just leaving things, I don't know, so that
I want to know, is the Veil also a chef? Is he whipping up like different soups every time? Is there a kitchen somewhere in this confession dial? Speaking of the Veil, we shouldn't go too far without crediting the guy who played the Veil, because he's, other than, obviously Clara comes in for 5 seconds, so Jenna Coleman's listed in this, although not on her own page. The Doctor gets his own page the first time in New Who, in the credits. But the Veil, I did not know, was played by the guy who played Colony Sarf.
Mm-hmm.
And that led me to
Coral.
Correct. And that led me to an interview with him where he talks about how he got picked for how they did Colony Sarf. I didn't realize that they used, like, in Magician's Apprentice, which is familiar in case you haven't. You don't remember Colony Sarf. He's the snake guy.
The snake guy, he like.
He float like he was sort of kind of why he keeps getting cast this stuff. He's very good at sort of floating into places, right? And eventually they gave him a segue. It was just a wonderful story that when he first did rehearsals opposite Capaldi just assumed he was like one of these guys who just goes around on Segway wheels. And just like, I'm just not going to say that, like, this is just this guy's process, whatever. Didn't realize that was actually going to be how he filmed it. But before that, he said he was trying to work with the directors, being like, well, I could moonwalk away. And as soon as I read that, I'm like, I got a picture of like the Veil instead of they pause it and the flies pause in midair and the Veil and all that. It's like the idea of the Veil just kind of moonwalking back.
There's a little spin.
Every time. Yeah. Woo! And I love that. If they'd just been, just given him that one line, I think that would have been fantastic. So, that would have been good stuff.
Cool. Well,
anyway,
some stuff is coming into view, and it might be a shadow slowly coming to my behind. But before it grabs me, I have one more thing to sort of talk about. So it is about the new information that we kind of get about the Doctor, where he confesses that he didn't leave Gallifrey because he was bored. That's a lie. It's always been a lie. He left because he was scared. And makes you ask, well, of what? And they sort of answer. It's like a hybrid, right? But I feel like that diminishes it a little bit, because it makes it like this is the tie-in with the season-long plot. And I think it's such a big reveal about the Doctor himself that sort of affects how you think about him in 60 years of the show. I like to think there's more there. And I think there is. They don't have to mine it too much. But I don't know. I wanted to hear from you guys first what you kind of thought before I sort of give what I think my take is.
No, I agree with that. I think It is, like I said, it's a really incredible episode. I don't know. I feel like it's stronger than the episodes surrounding it. Like
Definitely.
it almost feels like that idea could have been dropped in a lot of different places in Doctor Who. This isn't necessarily perhaps the best use of it. I mean, the hybrid thing is weird. I do like that it's how we get Gallifrey, but the hybrid stuff, it doesn't need to be in there. And
it is,
yeah,
it's unfortunate because it's kind of the weakest. I don't know what you think of this, Elisa, but it feels to me like that's the weakest part of Heaven Sent. That is the wall that we can actually punch through. Is the fact that the Doctor is defending his knowledge about the hybrid for 2 billion years. And then he just goes ahead and says it.
Yeah.
It says it's me. And by the way, in the script, me is capitalized. Therefore, more likely to refer to Ashilda, which is one theory of what he means.
Yeah, that's kind of what I always assumed. I mean, it's not me, but it's me.
It's a pun. The answer to this 4.5 billion year old puzzle.
Right?
So all the drama has been leading to a dad joke.
I mean, I think the stronger,
which is very Doctor.
The stronger story is just that he realized that Gallifrey or whatever was on the other side of that wall, he was going to take the risk here, and he wanted to get to that. And that's why he was holding out and taking the long way around. I mean, if he knew it was Gallifrey, that's not really clear if he did what was behind there. He saw the TARDIS. This is another thing, maybe my nitpick. Like, it's strange. He sees the TARDIS, right? Or he sees a light and he sees home.
He sees home. Which we have to assume that he himself has scratched that into.
Right.
Yeah, so how does he know it's Gallifrey or the TARDIS that's behind there? And he is, I feel like, if he took the hybrid out and that he just has some assumption that is Gallifrey, and he wants Gallifrey so bad that he's going to take this gigantic, this weight upon his shoulders to do this horrible thing and to punch through a diamond wall for 1 trillion years to get to it. If it's to get to Gallifrey, that's a lot more powerful than defending a very weak plot point.
I think the Doctor would know, and again, this is just my headcanon, but I think the Doctor would know that if he had written home, he wouldn't necessarily mean TARDIS. If he'd meant TARDIS, he would have written TARDIS. One presumes that he's writing it in English letters so that the Gallifreyans
How did he write it in the diamond? Right? That would have taken 1 million years.
Maybe in a few of the early iterations, he knows to take his spade with him when he gets to room 12, because that's his big problem later on. He should have said, I'm in room 12 brackets, and by the way, take the spade. That would have been good. So, but he would have written TARDIS, I think, and home the long way around is what he said at the end of Day of the Doctor. So he definitely calls Gallifrey home.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is I would have liked a little more maybe spelling out of his confession of being scared was why he left Gallifrey to the resolution confronting that revelation, which is to say what he was scared of and how him breaking through the diamond is facing that fear. Right. And I do feel like there is a fear of responsibility that's very much the Doctor that I think is what I would sort of, again, this is probably me leaping a little too far maybe, but I think that's kind of what I would take that to mean. And that coming back home and sort of facing that responsibility, hybrid or no, is confronting it and moving past it. That's sort of what I choose to sort of interpret it as, but I'm happy if someone else has another version of that. But it does require a little bit of headcanon, at least thematically.
All right. Let me throw in a few more things just before because I see some questions have been interviewed.
They're behind me.
First of all, very slowly, little flies buzzing. By the way, both the times I watched Heaven Sent for this episode, I watched it with dogs, different dogs, and both times when you hear the flies, the first times the dog looked up like, what? Where's that? So well done to the sound designers on that. Secondly, I will say if you're sitting there listening, thinking they haven't really talked about the whole nature of teleportation and science fiction and all that, we did a whole special episode on teleportation in which we talked about Heaven Sent. So go back and listen to that.
Google it.
And And also, I don't want to go too far without mentioning the fact the weird Dr. Puppet coincidence with this episode, right? Because it was filmed in Cardiff Castle. Alisa, you want to tell that story?
Yeah, it was filmed in Cardiff Castle, a place I've been to twice. And I first went in 2012, so way before Peter Capaldi. So I have been in there. I mean, they've used it for a few different locations, but little did I know it would be the primary location for my favorite Doctor Who episode ever later on. So I went there in 2012. I had the 11th Doctor Puppet with me, took a few photos. And then a couple of years later, when the 12th Doctor Puppet existed, Erin, who was an animator on Dr. Puppet, she was going on a trip to the UK and she was going to Cardiff, and she brought the 12th Dr. Puppet with her to Cardiff. And when she took a tour of the castle, she took a bunch of photos of our little Peter Capaldi puppet in Cardiff Castle before Heaven Sent aired. So just super weird. And I remember after the episode aired, after Erin watched it, she sent me like a photo and she's like, isn't it weird I took a photo of the 12th Doctor Puppet in the room where like there's that great shot in that huge room where like Peter just like runs around the corner and then runs at the camera. That's kind of like I think it's the library of Cardiff Castle. So there's a few puppets or photos of the puppet in there. And I kind
of want to know.
I'll dig it up. I'll dig up.
Yeah. I gotta get a link in the show notes to that.
Yeah,
we'll definitely link to that. I love the idea that, but maybe depending on the timing of this, that Erin was doing that. And then, Stephen Moffat's around the corner with a notebook. Like, ooh, that's interesting idea.
I know. It's around the same time. You never know. It's 2015. But I've been to Cardiff Castle. I went another time a couple years ago because I was in town for an animation festival. And I said, we got to go to the castle. It's fantastic. Whenever you're in Cardiff, love Cardiff Castle. And you can take a castle tour, and it's basically the Heaven Sent tour, and you get to see all the locations.
Do not throw a stool out the window. No. Pro tip.
That bedroom, I don't think you get to see, but you get to see the library. There's a bunch of rooms. It's a beautiful castle, and all those rooms where they filmed Heaven Sent, those are fairly modern rooms. They were built in the 1800s by a guy who was basically like a Victorian cosplayer who was obsessed with medieval castles and stuff. So a lot of Cardiff Castle it's modern, but it's meant to look old. And nice. It's absolutely hilarious. Highly recommend the tour.
Wow.
And learn all about the history of Cardiff Castle. And
who knew?
I know who knew. And they have actually shot a lot of Doctor Who there. It's not just Heaven Sent, because you go to Cardiff and you walk around, you realize they've basically shot an episode on every corner.
Awesome.
I love the idea that it was built by a cosplayer, and then the Doctor, sort of who's the ultimate Victorian cosplayer, shows up.
All right.
They have 2 billion years.
Thank you for that confession, Alisa. But we have some more things to confess. We must tell the truth when we answer the 4 questions to Doomsday. First question, why did the randomizer take us here?
Well, first of all, the randomizer does seasonally appropriate programming. They said, if you knew this, it takes us to Christmas episodes of Christmas. It took us to Last Christmas at Easter, which, and then we realized that Last Christmas contains more references to Easter than any other Doctor Who story. So it's the randomizer is kind of aware of what time of year it is. And it is now October. We're recording this in October. I believe we'll be putting it online right around Halloween-ish time, yes, Pete?
Sounds about right, yeah.
Sounds about right. And this episode, watching it, one of the first things that stuck in my head was that I immediately wrote it down the line, this is like concentrated October. Like, it's got that feel, right? It's spooky and Halloween-y, but also it's like you get the feel of a season turning and things are getting darker in a way, right? It's got that kind of fall vibe as well. It's not trying overly hard to scare you, even as it's trying overly hard to scare the Doctor. It's just very October.
Yeah. It's even got leaves falling if you think about it.
Physics. It's a physics lesson. Yeah.
Cool.
Pete, any particular reason why we came here after Planet of the Daleks, or Planet Asterisk of the Daleks?
Well, funny you should ask. Yes, I do think there are connections to the planets that we've been to. So, Planet of the Daleks, we said this at the time. There's a moment, more longer than a moment, but there's a bit where the Doctor believes he's lost Joe and that Joe has been killed by the Daleks in the ship. And, he's kind of angry and sad about it for about 5 seconds.
Yes.
And then he's like, oh, whatever, let's just move on. And now I'm here with the dolls, and we're going to cheer up my doll friend and talk about
you
things.
You just reminded me of that fact. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, by the way, there's a point where the Doctor, right after he thinks Joe has died, he's in the elevator with this Dalek for like a good minute on screen with not saying anything. And what I said at the time was, we need Muzak. We need elevator music in that scene. It's just like, it's the perfect contrast. Joe's just died. Just in the elevator with Starling. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And that was part of the inspiration that Moffat had for Heaven Sent, was like, he didn't want to do a time flight. Right? He didn't want to do companion has died, let's just go straight into the next episode. Which was what Old Who did, right? So yeah, I think you're right. The randomizer is contrasting that.
Yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, with Planet of the Spiders, obviously a good chunk of the Doctor's past is revealed there, especially his association with the Hermit and weird past of Gallifrey and just the weirdness of Gallifrey. So clearly that, there's only see Gallifrey at the end here, but there is more about where he comes from and who he is. So, little bit of a connection there. And finally, I already talked about this, but the bit in The Girl Who Waited, where they sort of emphasize his recklessness, and that episode, Girl Who Waited, sort of is part of this arc that ends with him dropping off Rory and Amy because he does fear what ultimately happens to Clara, which is that they get so caught up in his adventures that it becomes fatal. So lots of connections.
I think also we have to say that the randomizer is a sadist and he wants to torture the Doctor, because this is the ultimate Doctor torture episode, right? But also, like, he starts off Planet of the Daleks almost dead, right? He has to be restored in this sort of weird IKEA unit before he can come back to life. And then, of course, Planet of the Spiders, he's dying all over the place, radiation poisoning. And of course we don't know that he necessarily will regenerate in that episode that first mentions regeneration. So it kind of goes with all the Doctor deaths here where he doesn't. And it talks about regeneration. We haven't mentioned this. We get extra regeneration canon in Heaven Sent. You almost forget it, right? The line where it's like Time Lords take a long time to die.
Yeah. Which I've got on record before as not loving that version of regeneration. It works for this episode, but I do like it better when the Doctor's just kind of human, and it's the same except that he can turn into a person sometimes in an emergency situation. Another person, rather. Anyway, that's my take. We don't need to rehash it. Alisa, any randomizer connections? And you can go back as far as you want if you want to go all the way to the Day of the Doctor, because that's, in your mind, in your world, that was the last thing that happened before you punched through the wall and got here.
Let's connect them. It already came up, but the long way around. Really, it's just about finding Gallifrey, and kind of the big stepping stones of like losing Gallifrey to finding it. Those are, Day of the Doctor is like the biggest stepping stone in the middle, and then Heaven Sent is where he finds it. So it's kind of perfect. And those episodes are like 3 years apart.
2013 to 2015. So 22 years apart.
Close, but yeah, we've done them 3 years apart at the same time of year. Yeah. And it is interesting because we did talk in that podcast. Go back and listen to it. By the way, this was way on in the early part of our evolution. So it's a little more rough and ready. But when you listen to it, like we're talking a lot about Day of the Doctor or Heaven Sent. Day of the Doctor or Heaven Sent. Like it's which is the best, right? So it's entirely appropriate that eventually we would revisit that question. And, you taking us to Hellbent was just such a perfect tease of the randomizer being like, no, I'm going to take you the long way around. And
right.
100%.
Well, we're going to take the long way around to our final judgment on this episode, because there are two other questions we have to answer first, with first one being, what if the evil plot had succeeded? Okay, so what's the evil plot? I guess
whose evil plot is it?
Yeah.
And specifically, we find out in Hellbent, it's Rassilon, right?
Yes.
He wants to find out who the hybrid is.
What the Doctor knows. Or at least he thinks he knows about the
And he
hybrid.
couldn't just straight up ask him. Typical dude. Has to put him through this whole thing.
The Time Lord's evil plot succeeds, though, then the Doctor confesses that he doesn't know the hybrid, or he just tells them it's me while he's in the confession dial. And then you could almost envision a who's on first kind of back and forth. It's me. And then the Veil's just like, what? And then it keeps advancing. No, me. And then so he's got needs some kind of conversational partner.
Like, at some point, Rassilon's going to be watching this and going to be, oh, for heaven's sake. And he just comes down.
He goes into the Mind Palace TARDIS, and Clara's like, you have to be more specific. I don't know. It is a strange choice to name her me just to set up that line. I truly don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little too clever. This is the kind of thing that Moffat would do all the time, with the ultimate question being Doctor Who in Smith's era, and this kind of wordplay almost as plot. It is a little weird. Again, I don't think it affects this episode. That affects Hellbent more than this one. In Hellbent, there's a lot of back and forth about the hybrid, so you actually sort of find out he doesn't actually know what it is, and that's what his whole thing here is. Like, he couldn't tell them because he doesn't know, but it's the whole using the torture chamber against them, so that's why he had to punch his way out, at least partially, because it's the only way he could really get out and do it on his terms. Because if he does it on their terms, I think he's just thrown away, and he doesn't get the chance to save Clara in the next episode, essentially. And that's what's driving him. Not so much the hybrid stuff.
A little messy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could also say that the evil plot is the Doctor's to just be bullheaded and not just, like, confess more about the hybrid. Just talk about the hybrid, man. Like, all this could be, you did not need to punch through that wall.
He wants to make another immortal being against their will.
Yeah, I mean, the Veil's on the clock. The Veil is on the clock. You should see his overtime reports. Like, just the Time Lords. That's actually why Rassilon is banished in Hellbent, because he totally bankrupted Gallifrey by paying the Veil. The Veil is now the richest being in the cosmos because of his timesheets for this.
You could see, like, the Doctor just punching out, and he's like, no, wait for me, and it closes in front of him. Dude! I'm still here in the dial! Hey, anybody? No?
Where is he at that point when the Doctor finally comes through? Isn't he going to be like, yeah, come on.
It actually, like, it falls apart, right? There's that bit where it's just a bunch of gears, and so it's some kind of mechanism. So that's kind of what you get. Oh, it's part of the trap. So that, again, this is why some of that short story about it being a being doesn't quite make sense unless you sort of presume it's sort of some sentient android or whatever. Anyway. Okay, not a lot of satisfying evil successes there. So how about we move on to the third question, which is, where is the Clara Splinter?
It's going to be an interesting one.
Yes, Clara Oswald, splintered in time at the end of The Name of the Doctor. She's somewhere in every single Doctor Who story. Where is she in Heaven Sent?
Under the skulls.
What do you say that? So this is my only thing I could think of. But I think the erosion explanation is probably all you need. But I kind of figured, like, every few million years, the Clara Splinter clears out the skulls.
Yes.
So that, a few more could go in and just, I don't know, throws them away somewhere in deep space somewhere. There's a planet where the ring is just Doctor skulls.
No, I think that she's making the soup. She's baking the bread. That's her. She's in the kitchen.
Kitchen staff Clara. I love that idea. And that would certainly explain why that portrait is so photorealistic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, very, very good portrait, Doctor. Maybe on one of the early go-rounds, she's actually there, and he's like, "You look familiar. Can I paint you?" And, maybe they got some hell-bent, amnesia going on at that point. And that's how that painting happens. But I had this idea that, so we talked a lot about Time Lady Clara in this segment over the years. You know, she's the one who directed William Hartnell to the busted up old Type 40 in the first place, in the name of the Doctor. We definitely saw that happening. And we posited that she's sort of sticking around and kind of helping to guide the Doctor's evolution throughout this. Well, the biggest unanswered question that I think Clara can help with in Heaven Sent is, where the hell is this confession dial? How does it get from Trap Street to Gallifrey? Well, someone's got to bring it there. I think that Time Lady Clara appears in Trap Street. I think there's a deleted scene. And Mia's like, what the hell? And Clara's like, oh, no, I'm Time Lady Clara. She's wearing a bowler hat in this scene as she just teleports in. Sorry, Terror of the Autons reference. And she just takes that confession dial, and she's always kind of managing things from above. And then she knows to place it in the desert in Gallifrey, just at the perfect time, the right point. If it is 2 billionaires in real time, which is suggested by the stars, then she's got a hell of a job right there to keep that.
I like that because you could imply that there are 4.5 billion years worth of Clara splinters. Like, who's to say there aren't that many? And that she just sort of, it's a thing that she passes on to the next one every lifetime, you know? So there's just tons of that. And
maybe somewhere else in the castle, there's another teleportation chamber where another Clara comes out and is given the instructions of, like, you can't ever actually see the Doctor, but look, we got a bunch of stuff to do, and could you just leave this spade here? And, you know, she's going through. And maybe she's even the Veil. Who knows?
Yeah.
That would certainly be a way for them to avoid paying the Veil. Clara's just doing it every day for free.
Any other ideas, Alisa, where she might be?
I mean, someone's got to be like cranking all the gears, so she might be.
She just kind of turns the dial every time he confesses something.
Yeah.
Speaking of those gears, I got to say, I mean, you know, the sound of drums gave us the headcanon that the Doctor Who theme itself is what you hear if you stare in the untempered schism for too long, right? You get the sound of drums in your head. I love the idea now that those gears at the opening of the Capaldi episodes are actually the gears of the confession dial. And that's my headcanon. I will not see it any other way when I see those credits.
You know, so that season, series 8, that was the one, unless
season 9, yeah,
series
the
9,
Capaldi.
sorry,
yeah.
Series 9.
Well, series 8 was the first time we saw the gear opening.
Oh yeah.
Series 9 was it the clock inspired one, or was that series 10? I'm trying to.
No, series 8. Capaldi's series, his entire run was always the clock.
Okay,
the clock gear.
But it starts off with gears and then clock.
Okay, because it was based on a fan made.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I'm trying to remember if that had the gears. If that was always in there, then it's weird that would have inspired Heaven Sent. Potentially. I've never made that connection before. Since that,
And then he just needed the location, and he just happened to be in Cardiff Castle one day, and he sees a puppet that looks like a Capaldi.
Maybe it all came together. Never thought about that. That could be potentially a connection. Interesting.
Potentially a connection. Go on.
Yeah, there was, again, I can't quite remember the details because this is something Rachel Talalay said live on stage when I saw her at Gallifrey 1. But she mentioned getting, I don't know if it was the same YouTuber who was doing like fan content around the same time of like.
Yes.
So there was, right? I can't remember.
I read this in an interview with her. She got the guy who did, I forget his name now, but he was a famous YouTuber.
Yeah. He did,
and she just straight up asked him out of the blue, like, how do I do the fall scene?
Yep. Okay.
And he recommends something about lifting up Capaldi's jacket, which you can see in the behind the scenes shots.
He did a whole like previs. He did a bunch of previs for the episode, and galley, she played a bunch of the previses, and some of them she was like, this episode got special attention, a little extra budget, but we didn't have the budget for this. So, some of the shots were very intense, and so we did. We only have a little previs version of it, but yeah, it was Peter falling out of the tower. Very cool.
They gave a lot of special attention, but it's still TV. I mean, you're still on the clock. There's still only so much you can do in the time allotted.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the time allotted we have is rapidly evaporating. But before we get to our final ratings, folks, I wanted to remind you, you can get full notes on what we thought about this episode if you subscribe to our newsletter at pull2open.net. There's always a few things we don't get to. So there's fresh content there for you. And of course, you can also follow us on social media. We are at Pull2Open or Pull2Open63 on all kinds of networks, including Facebook, Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok, where we often share short videos. And go ahead and engage with us there. Drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. But now it is time for the final question, the ultimate question, the only question that matters for Heaven Sent. What did we think of this story? The Pull to Open rating system has 7 ratings. They are the Dalek, which is a good episode of Doctor Who, the Ogron, an irredeemably bad episode of Doctor Who, the Professor Hater, a not so great episode, but hey, at least they tried something, the Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best, the Fixed Point in Time, which is a show beyond rating, usually for reasons of nostalgia, the Lady Cassandra, which is a paper-thin plot, but hey, at least it looks good, and the Zarbi, an episode that is so bad, it is good. Did you get all that, Alisa? You might look over some notes.
It's a good rating system.
We'll come to you while we like to do these with guests. Is I'll give a rating or Chris will give a rating. Anyway, we'll give our ratings and you can be the tiebreaker.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I can go first and say it's obviously this is a Lady Cassandra. No, I'm kidding. It's beautiful, but that plot, man, so paper thin. No, the plot is harder than 400 times harder than Diamond. It's a solid plot, and it has to be a banger. It's a Viscount banger. Why wouldn't it be?
There you go. Wow, short and sweet. So I feel obligated to give this a banger. So it's hard to sort of see through this because it's so well regarded. It is, we just said it's been voted the absolute best by the fans through Doctor Who magazine. It's gotten a lot of praise. But I gotta say, there are some weaknesses we went over here. I mean, it's not perfect. And the main thing is the one we closed on, which is the confession and sort of getting at the Doctor's fear and shoehorning that into the season plot feels just a little unsatisfying. So yes, it's a banger. For Capaldi's performance alone, honestly, it's a banger. The plot is genius. But I'm going to say this, and this might be controversial, I do think it's a tad overrated. I do, and I will say this, I don't think it is as good as Day of the Doctor. I think Day of the Doctor is higher than this in terms of, at least in my book, it delivers on more of what it's trying to do with the show thematically while still tying it into the story they're doing. I don't think they come pretty close. This again, I'm not trying to take too much away from this. I'm in no way saying this is a bad episode or even not a stellar episode of Doctor Who. It is, but now we're talking about the storied top 5 really of Doctor Who and where is it? It's there, but I don't think it's number 1. That said, I can't end on like a caveated note. This is a Viscount Banger. Of course it is. I mean, I could watch it over and over again. Capaldi's awesome. All the lines are awesome. It's super quotable. And the fact that you sometimes want to pick at some of these things like the clothes and whatever is really a testament to just what a brilliant puzzle box that Stephen Moffat came up with here. You just want to keep going back to it. It's like this, the Rubik's Cube. I want to mix it up again because I want to solve it again. It's so cool. So definitely one of the best of the best. It's a banger. And it's really up there. Where someday when we finish all the episodes of Doctor Who, we'll have a top 5 and a top 10 and whatever from this podcast. It's up there, but I got to say, of all the ones we've done, it's probably number 2 so far.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with that. But yeah, so Lisa, let's hear your rating.
I mean, it's a banger. No, definitely the Viscount banger all the way. I mean,
unanimous.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is don't overthink it. I think that it's best just let it wash over you. Don't think too hard. I think Moffat shouldn't defend any of it and just say enjoy it, and don't try to explain where the coat came from. I don't care, because emotionally it works, and that is what matters more.
I mean, I'd say, I think in terms of comparing it to Day of the Doctor, like they are such different episodes, right? And they're trying to do such different things with such different aesthetics that it's almost impossible to compare. And I think that's a good thing for Doctor Who. I think overall, the fact that we're even debating which one is the best, and we will again, by the way, go back and listen to our top 100 episode. We'll do another one of those eventually, but Day of the Doctor was number one in there. I think from what Pete's saying, it's probably going to be number one again, but Day of the Doctor will be up there. Heaven Sent will be up there. And I think the fact that the show is just taking so many risks still at this point in its life, and, RTD, of course, taking more risks in the current season, episodes like 73 Yards. Like, it's a really good sign of the health of Doctor Who that we're even able to have this argument. And that the argument is really between two things that are so completely different stylistically that you can barely even compare them, right?
Yeah, Doctor Who needs to keep smashing that window and keep jumping down and figuring it out on the way down, 100%.
Which is exactly what it does, and it's a wonderful reminder. And I will say one last thing about this. I can't end this episode without talking very briefly about John Paul Sartre and the whole existential theory of imagine Sisyphus happy, which is what you must do, which Sartre realizes. Like, the ultimate thing of existentialism is the TLDW of existentialism is imagine Sisyphus happy. Like, we're all doing the same thing over and over again every day. Basically, we're getting up, we're pushing that rock up the hill. But if you know that you're doing it, if you know that's your fate, why not be happy about it? And that's kind of what Heaven Sent teaches us as well. A lot of people have said it's very good for depression. Very good episode. That wasn't the intention. It was more an episode about grief. But depression, like, is in there as well. Like, the Doctor's like, oh, he's so tired. I don't want to deal with this anymore, right? But you have to keep pushing that rock up the hill, and you can actually enjoy it, and he gets to have fun with it. Like, he says at one point, it's Christmas, right? He's in a locked box. He's in his favorite place to be. So, yeah, imagine Sisyphus happy and imagine the Doctor in Heaven Sent happy.
Okay, I think that's great. Yeah, we got to keep pushing this rock up the hill. It's time for us to push it over the hill, I think, and smash through our commentary into what we're going to go to next by activating the randomizer.
And I'll just say that's a hell of a bird. Oof. Okay, the randomizer has two components. Pete is probably sitting at the controls of one of them, which is the Codex. A complete list of Doctor Who stories in non-random order. Weird. And Alisa, would you once again like to operate the second part of the randomizer, the Executor, aka random.org?
Certainly. Okay. Random.org.
Yes, now we're a little more sophisticated here on Pull to Open than the last time you operated the randomizer. Back in the day, we had time-locked episodes where we could just go, but we don't do that anymore. Peter's actually able to tell us how much of this diamond wall we still have to punch through to get home. Pete, what is the magic number?
The magic number is 183.
Whoa. Okay.
183. So before you hit generate on that, before you give us a random number, Alisa, we do like to have this, take a moment to talk to the randomizer nicely about where, we've learned to be very careful with our requests. We've learned that, for example, when Pete asked for something where music was a factor and it took us to the Armageddon factor, the randomizer likes dad jokes. So, it likes to be clever. So, we need to be a little wary about this. We need to be a little bit clever. And I will say that I would like to go to another episode with as minimal dialogue. Not saying necessarily, one-hander, two-hander. Doesn't matter how many people are in it, but we've already done the Deadly Assassin, right? That would be a good thing for episode 3, which is famously almost no dialogue in that. But maybe there's something else in Doctor Who history with the anti-Moffatiness of very, very minimal dialogue. Pete, what you got?
Well, this was effectively a prison that the Doctor was in, and he's often in prison. There's a lot of episodes where he's in a prison and there's some kind of escape or some kind of thing he needs to do to get out, whatever it is.
Pretty much
enough with the prisons, all right? Let's just do something where he stays out of prison. I don't know if there is an episode of Doctor Who where he is, at the very least, captured and thrown in a closet or something.
Talk about a repeat offender. My goodness.
Yeah. Stay away from the prison.
In and out of jail, this guy. You never hire him for anything. At least do you have do you have any requests that could doom us in an interesting way as you head off to Gallifrey?
I mean, going from essentially a one-hander, like something with just tons of characters. Just
thousands. Yeah.
Yeah, it could.
I mean, probably it's the end of time.
Yeah.
Well, we started with the Whomoji challenge, with the end of time, right? That would be that's a cast of 4.8 billion.
Yeah, just to make it really hard.
Masters. Yeah, I love that. All right, so we're ready. Pete will give you a countdown. You'll hit the generate button, and then he will tell you what the number corresponds to.
Okay, so we're going between. You said 183, right?
183. So here comes the countdown. In 4, 3, 2, 1.
Excellent.
Generate 36. Oh, it's a little
36. Oh boy, we're early. I'm guessing it's probably going to be another Pertwee. And it is!
Oh?
The Time Warrior.
Oh! Okay. I've not seen this one, and it's bad. Right.
Don't give your rating already. What are you talking about? We haven't even seen it. The Time Warrior is the very first appearance of Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith.
Oh, nice.
That's what it's known for.
Jane.
Yeah, and also the first appearance of the Sontarans.
Mm-hmm. So
big deal. A lot of firsts in this episode.
Wow.
Very exciting. But has it met any of our criteria? Is the Doctor in prison in this?
Good question. I can't remember. Probably.
I guess we'll find out.
Given our averages and how Doctor Who usually goes, I'm going to guess yes.
Pertwee, he was in jail a lot. That guy was banged up for pretty much half his tenure.
Decent-sized cast in this one, I think. There's a lot of folks on the battlements and stuff in the castles. There's more castles. Boom.
Hey, the castle connection.
Always.
How about that? Wow.
Oh.
And definitely kind of a similar garb. The Doctor's in a green coat in this one, right?
I have no idea.
As I seem to remember, yes. So he's looking a bit fancy. I don't know if at any point he goes for a swim, takes it off, puts it on a drying rack. But if he did, I think it would look a lot like the velvet coat.
Yeah, the velvet. That's the connection. Velvet.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for listening to all of our thoughts on Heaven Sent. This is Pull to Open. It's a podcast. If you haven't followed it or subscribed, please do that now. My deep eternal thanks to Alisa Stern for coming and joining us for this commentary. Alisa, where can people subscribe to what you're doing?
Probably the place I'm more active these days is just on Instagram. Still using that Dr. Puppet handle. Not posting a terrible amount of Doctor Who these days, but still a lot of stop motion. You can follow my stop motion adventures there and, see what I'm up to. And sometimes I'll throw in like a nostalgic Dr. Puppet photo just for fun and then watch my engagement go way up. And then I go back to posting all the stuff I do now and it goes way back down. So it's fun.
Well, speaking of things that stand up to repeated viewing, Dr. Puppet, you guys, if you needed a reason to go back and check it out, it is time. Yeah. Thank you, Martin West, of course, as always, for a review. Don't forget to follow us on social, Pull to Open or Pull to Open 63. And we will see you next time for The Time Warrior, way back in the first days.
One fun fact I'll give you before we get a fun personal fact. This was the first Doctor Who, I'm totally aging myself here, it's the first Doctor Who on screen after I was born.
The first Doctor Who?
There we go.
What?
After I was born. I was born and they showed the Time
Warrior. The Time Warrior was. I thought you meant like Heaven Sent. You're not that young.
Heaven Sent, no. No, I'm born again every day, as will you be born again next time you hear us on Pull to Open. Take care, everyone.